Right, almost done. Just some neutrals. Cryptographer. This is a really cool card that has very much impressed me. I completely underestimated it when I saw it in the spoilers, and I always think that's the hallmark of an interestingly designed card that unfolds as you go along. So it's mostly played in Lilith decks, where it's basically a better Wraithling Swarm, or copies 4 through 6 of Wraithling Swarm. And it's also played in Vast decks, I think, so they can get extra buffs earlier on. I've seen some people do that. It doesn't look like much as a card, but because it lets you break that economy of having your Bloodborne spell only work at certain points in the game, it actually has a very interesting, surprisingly game-defining effect for a little 2/2. You know, with Ferosa, if you're going second, you can go Ferosa behind you, Cryptographer on the mana tile, use a Bloodborne spell right away. You've got a bunch of 2/2s, you've got a Ferosa behind you, where it's somewhere safe. If you've got another Cryptographer in hand, you know, stuff's going down. But outside of that nut draw, that interaction is still really interesting and cool. And I like that you can also just use it to get your Bloodborne spell up early, because Bloodborne spells are usually quite powerful, and some of them scale as the game goes on. Like, the more Wraithings you put out, the earlier you put them out, the more likely you are to be able to combo off before your opponent kills you as a Lilith player. With Varth, you know, the activating a Bloodborne spell early is very powerful, because they stack. So each activation counts and makes the others better. So the fact that the card is neat by itself and has neat interactions, and is cheap, so you can just, you know, easily play it in the early turns, but it's still useful late because it has these cool interactions to it. I think that's a sweet design. Sanguinar, I have not seen anyone play this. I've not even really considered playing it myself. Again, that's not necessarily a huge deal. Like, it's just a weak card. Those are allowed to exist and will inevitably exist. And I think having a really pushed card that made your Bloodborne spell free would be, you know, if it was good enough to play in every deck, or even just any deck. Like, if it was, I think it is one of those cards where if it was good enough, it would show up in a lot of decks, and end up kind of tilting the balance of the game a little bit, because the Bloodborne spells are quite well crafted, and the mana curve of the game itself is crafted such that, you know, having them cost 1 mana is right. Cheating the system with Sanguinar, like if it was a cheap, you know, if it was a 2/3 for 2 or something, for instance, or even just big, you know, if it was Hailstone Golem sized for the sake of argument, then I think the card would be just that little bit, it could become prevalent enough that it would tilt the dynamic of Bloodborne spells and the feel of Bloodborne spells away from what the designers wanted. So I think that's some potential rationale for why the card isn't massively pushed. It could also just have been, you know, designed as a fairly safe card that wasn't meant to break anything. You know, might not be that deep of a motivation behind it being, you know, a little suboptimal. But, you know, maybe it's actually great and just no one's tried it yet. It doesn't look like much, because 4 mana 5/4s with no other value text never really set the world on fire, but you know, maybe it's actually quite strong. Who knows? I mean, certainly if it had an opening gambit, the Bloodborne spell costs 1 less forever. That'd be pretty sweet. They might still not be overpowered. I'd be interested to see. I'm not necessarily saying counterplay should go to the trouble of doing this, but I'd be quite interested to see how that would affect the game if it was a card. Finally, Meltdown. So when they spoiled this card, I was like, whoa! I played a bunch of Hearthstone. It's Ragnaros, right? We, you know, anyone who's played Hearthstone looked at it and went, oh, it's Ragnaros. That's nuts. It does, however, have a pretty big advantage over Ragnaros, and it can also attack by itself. So it actually deals 14 damage a turn, not 7 or 8 in Ragnaros' case. Despite all that, despite its really obvious power level, it's surprisingly not very good. And I'm not sure why. I mean, it is effectively an 8 mana play. 8 mana for 7 damage to a random enemy isn't great. You know, if it hits the thing you want to hit, cool, you've got a Spiral Technique and a 7/7, that's pretty good. If it misses, then you did nothing. yeah, they have a 7/7, which you have a 7/7, which your opponent probably has to deal with, but it's late in the game, they can do that. Or they can just kill you. And I think that's Meltdown's biggest problem. It looks like you want to play it in slow decks because it's a big late game win condition that gets lots of value over time. And it's largely expensive. But those decks are so often behind on board that the card doesn't do that much. And again, actually I think that's fine. Because if Meltdown was really powerful, we'd see a lot of games decided by Meltdown RNG. Now, that is not necessarily a defense of the card. It is healthier to say, let's just not make a card that will decide games by RNG if it's good, rather than saying, let's make a card that could decide games by RNG, but make it weaker. The flip side of that, there is a devil's advocate argument to that. Some players really like stuff like this, and making cards that appeal to them, but not at such a high power level that everyone else will have to put up with it all the time, is quite valuable. It's not so much cards that are like casual, but just players' preferences. Different players like different things. Some people like really slow decks. Some people like really fast decks. As a simple example. Some people like randomness. Like they like the RNG, the excitement of the swinging effects. Some people play Pado on purpose, right? Because they like it. Not just as a disruptive element, but because it's fun. Meltdown could just be, and again I'm speculating, could just be a card aimed at those people and pitched at the right level of not quite powerful enough to see play everywhere but still alrightness, that the people who like it will find it satisfying when it works, and the people who don't like it won't have to deal with it all the time. It is also just interesting to see how a card like this is just nowhere near as good in Duelyst as I expected. Because again, from experience with Ragnaros in Hearthstone, Ragnaros is gross. But I think it's because in Duelyst, despite what I was saying earlier on when I was talking about Lionar, about how you kind of have to kill your opponent's minions all the time, in Duelyst, especially in the late game, it is often the case that both players have minions out. Especially if your turn is playing a Meltdown instead of killing your opponent's minions from the previous turn. They'll have something. And then you might have something as well. You play your Meltdown defensively, they can't necessarily get at it, maybe they don't have a removal spell. No, you both have minions in play. Ragnaros in Hearthstone is, at least in slow matchups, often easier to play on an empty board, because the board stays empty for more of the time. And in Hearthstone it's very, very rare that both players have the ability to attack with minions at any point. Like much more rare than it is in Duelyst. And it's already quite rare in Duelyst. But the ability to hide stuff behind your generals or behind other minions far away does contribute a lot to that. Minions can't just constantly trade into each other in an advantageous way for the attacker. And I think that might be part of why Meltdown is not as overpowering as Ragnaros. The other thing is that depending on which hero you're playing, you might not be able to get much value off the Bloodborn spell itself. Like, I played this in my slow Kara deck with Jax and Embler, and he's so awkward because I want to kinetic surge him, but then I can't use the effect. Rubbish. I imagine playing it with a different general who's a bit more amenable to just having a Bloodborne spell that always works, like Faye or Xerix. You'd probably get better results out of him. But as it is, I've played with it a little bit, I've played against it a little bit, never really seen him break the game. It is a card that you have to be scared of, but he rots in my hand more than he does anything, much less win the game. Which I'm very interested to see. Like that's news to me, and I still don't quite believe my own explanation for as to why. Surely it should be insane, but yeah, you're just so often in the decks you play it in, you're just so often on the back foot on the board that you can't just play Meltdown and kill the thing you want to kill, or hit the face when you want to hit the face. Right, that's everything. That took a while. I'll be sure to cut it up into pieces when I put it on YouTube. I hope that was entertaining and interesting, and again, let me know if you have comments or thoughts or replies or opinions on anything I've said. And if you'd like me to do more of this stuff, I can do similar long form ones, or I can do shorter form ones for individual cards. Talking about, I think when Shimzar came out, I was going to do something talking about cards like Pax and Inquisitor Kron, but then they nerfed Kron And that took some of the impetus away from what I was going to say, and then I got distracted and forgot about it. So I certainly enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I love talking about game design, so I'm always happy to chat about this stuff. I'll do more videos about it. Please let me know what you thought if you have any opinions. Do I have time to do a ladder game? No, it's like 11. I'm going to rest my voice a little bit. Thank you all very much for watching, and have a good night.